が限界だ。押すね。今だ。やったぞ。発動したぞ。
Hello, Playing Von Karma here, back with a new episode of RBY Bytes. Counter is one of the most interesting, but also controversial moves in Generation 1. It was designed as counterplay to physical attackers, but, due to a Russian Link battle system, it also counters opponents who want to play the game at all. Counter is one of the worst offenders for D6, situations where Link battles will gradually move further away from each other and break the game, which made it one of the biggest tiering policy nightmares in competitive Pokemon history. Before we get into that fiasco though, let's talk about how Counter works in Generation 1. Like in later generations, Counter will deal double damage back to an opposing Pokemon if it's activated. However, its activation conditions are very different. It only works against normal and fighter type moves, which, while making it awful from an in-game perspective, leaves it incredibly powerful in competitive play thanks to Hyper Beam and Body Slam being very common moves. The real kick, however, is that damage isn't reset between turns. In modern games, if you don't counter an attack on the very same turn, your chance to counter it is just gone. Here though, that attack, really damage you will reflect, can be stored for extended periods of time. You see, counter stored damage will only be erased when the last selected move fulfills any of the following conditions. Number 1, it wasn't a normal or fighting type move. Number 2, it had 0 base power. Number 3, it failed to damage the counter user. Additionally, some specific moves won't reset counter's damage, as this was hard-coded into the moves and some just missed out for some reason. This means that the stored damage from earlier can activate on the next turn after these are used, just regardless. You'll see these on screen now. Due to these conditions, actions such as switching out will not reset counter's damage. For example, if Taurus uses Body Slam against Chansey and switches out on the next turn, Chansey can counter that Body Slam and deal massive damage to the switch-in. Similarly, if he uses Hyper Beam and Chansey survives, counter will activate as Taurus recharges, no prediction needed, and KO it. A lot of other funny things can happen with this move, like countering your recoil damage or even an explosion, but hitting switches and Hyper Beam recharges are the main competitive uses for storing counter damage. So let's talk about a common interaction in RBY's mid-game, Snorlax vs Chansey. Snorlax is one of the greatest progress makers in Overused, having one of the strongest body slams in the game. Defending against it is pivotal to getting the upper hand, and Chansey is one of the better Pokemon for walling it, especially when using Reflect. Keep in mind, it can't be paralysed by Body Slam. If Chansey is paralysed beforehand, however, the interaction flips on its head, with Chansey now threatened with a 3-hit KO from Body Slam, or worse, a 2-hit KO if it's used alongside Hyper Beam. Snorlax can even self-destruct if it wants before Chansey can even move, which OHKOs it outright. Chansey has one move that can make this interaction consistent after it switches into Body Slam though. Counter. If Snorlax hits Chansey with Body Slam and gets countered, it faces a guaranteed 1-hit KO. Snorlax has ways to get around this though, with Earthquake being the most basic of the bunch. Earthquake is ground type and thus cannot be countered in RBY, giving Snorlax a safer attack to use with at least comparable damage, while also helping against Gengar. You could say that the threat of counter keeps Snorlax honest, forcing it to check for counter before truly trying to break through Chansey. I love this interaction. Snorlax is undeniably the best progress maker in the game, breaking apart a lot of common cores to arrive at an open game state, but it still has to think about what it's doing. If you're too hasty and push too hard, then you can have this valuable tool just ripped away from you. It's hard to explain just how cool counter is, really. The mind games it encourages are something you just don't see in many other places, and the counterplay is just enough to keep it balanced. I hope you try stuff like this out for yourself after watching this video, of course. However, in January 2020, it was found that RBY games don't deliver counter move information to both sides with full parity. One side will check what move was hovered over, while the other will check what was selected. As a result, if a non-counterable move is selected while a Pokemon experiences full paralysis, the game will desync, because one side will see counter work, while the other won't. For instance, Alakazam may try to use Psychic to mix Chansey up while using Seismic Toss to save power points, but if it experiences full paralysis on the same turn Chansey chooses to try and counter, then the game is rendered unplayable. It's also possible to prevent your opponent from ever having a usable counter by hovering over a non-counterable move, backing out of the fight menu, and switching out. Worse still, if you try to do this when the last move used was counterable, the player who hovered will see counter fail, and the counter use will see it succeed, also causing a desync. So you have a move with a ton of really cool utility that will unfortunately desync the game in many conventional gameplay sequences. Like, this happens a lot. This revelation brought a lot of division in the RBY community, which uses Pokemon Showdown Simulator to play Gen 1 online. The simple answer is to ban counter to preserve accurate cartridge mechanics while preventing D6, which resulted in unplayable game state once they go off, effectively forcing a draw, so you know, it's just all fucked up. But at the same time, well, this move is sick. Surely there's a different way to handle it, you know? Eventually, the option to just patch the move on Showdown was brought up. This is modding the game no matter how you slice it, and purists obviously dislike this. The rationale was that because few people actually play on cartridge, after all you either need an emulator with netplay or a really good circle of friends, then it makes sense to patch it, as Pokemon Showdown RBY is the actual game people usually play. Plus, the simulator didn't simulate the divide by zero errors the game has, involving light screen and reflect, which is a whole other topic, and well, this wasn't too different. The point makes sense from a community perspective, given we mostly play simulators, but does bring into question what we're actually playing. Generation 1 Pokemon, or a new game of our own making? Eventually, Counter's fate was brought to a vote, where players would choose whether to patch or ban Counter. A list of eligible voters was drawn up, though the initial one was vetoed by tiering staff due to including off-site tournaments, a situation never considered prior to votes like this, which have since been shifted for more competitive purposes. For this vote though, a new list had to be made using only Smogon tournaments. The player list was disputable as newer faces that made their mark on Pokemon Perfect were kept off, but the remaining players had still made significant competitive impacts on the game. In the end, Counter was voted to be patched. This vote set an important precedent. In the event of a move having game-breaking effects, then whenever the game-breaking effects will occur, a patch will make the move fail, effectively forcing a 1-2-56 miss and allowing the game to continue. So this technically is replicable on a cartridge if you're really lucky. This policy would become known as Desync Clause Mod, and it allowed for Psywave to become an accepted move too. More information on that in the card up above. But as you would expect, this vote was met with ire by some players. It is for good reason. Psywave was banned on Pokemon Perfect without second thought, but when a competitive move became relevant, the community mindset and policy were swiftly reevaluated. While it's easy to cry double standards of alike, it's worth remembering that Pokemon Perfect and Smogon are two different sites with different policies, and Psywave was never truly banned on Smogon. It was kind of banned in some tournaments run by Lutra, but that was basically it. The real criticism is that Desync Clause Mod meant RBY on Showdown was now not replicable on cartridge, without modding or using arbitrary code execution to rewrite the game itself. Whether you prioritize liberating interesting moves or keeping cartridge faithfulness, mods like this will always be something that many can see as unjustifiable. This is valid. They are here to play RBY in its unfiltered form, and many players of this ideology even oppose how sleep and freeze clause are enforced, on the basis of them being inaccurate to what would happen on cartridge. After all, on cartridge, you don't see their effects failing if seen in multiples. But obviously this is a topic for another video. The division that this mod created brought a lot of the more opinionated players into the open. One player with particularly heavy opinions, Orthior, made a long post claiming Smogon had betrayed the RBY community, citing his lack of tournament support from the generation for the past few years, followed by this out-of-touch suspect test. He would continue to campaign against this vote for an extended period, culminating in him entering the third RBY OU winter seasonal under an ult, and deliberately forfeiting in the finals. He was eventually found out on tournament ban, and since then nothing quite like this has happened. It's a sad state of affairs, but his displeasure with Smogon's past lack of support is understandable, and it was pretty high profile. The reason purity was disregarded to instate this mod is complicated. D6 and RBY are difficult to tier around because there is always a chance an undiscovered one could crop up, and the ones that exist are quite egregious as is, causing many gameplay restrictions to be made for a resultant D6 that Showdown cannot simulate anyway. Even a purist interpretation of counter would require alternate losing conditions for players that cause the D6. Such alternate mechanics are generally considered to be undesirable, as they deviate from how the game is meant to work in and of themselves, and can create a game that isn't really RBY anymore. Anyway, it's really weird. Purists will argue that modding means we're making a game that isn't RBY, and even required modding should be minimised as much as possible. And that argument does have merit. After all, we're modding the game. Personally, I believe it's something more akin to Melee's Universal Controller fix, which implements minor fixes to flawed mechanics for a smoother gameplay experience. However, this isn't quite one-to-one. UCF fixes minor mechanics that are partially caused by hardware imbalances between GameCube controllers, while Showdown is ignoring moves themselves being, well, broken. While a tough sell, I do think this comparison does have some merit. We're both fixing an archaic game's issues, and these issues grow stronger as we learn more about the game we're playing. But it does remain a difficult debate with no right or wrong answer. The debate on mods in Pokemon will rage on until the end of time. Preserving one of the coolest moves in the franchise was definitely something that had community benefits. But was it the right decision? I'll let you decide in the comments, eh? This was Pokemon Karma, and I'll see you all next time.